everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of Above the Ring, brand new netball show where we get to talk about all things netball and hopefully pass on some hints and tips to both athletes and coaches. My name's Greg, I've got Jade and Guy here. Today's topic is coachability versus coach's ability. Often we will be out working with clubs, whether it's during a trial season or just with a brand new coach that's taken on a team, and they've heard somebody reference a player as not being coachable. And that's due to their personal experience that they've had with that player. And often, we just want to look at the two variances. Is it the coachability of the player, or do we need to look at the coach's ability of being able to engage those athletes? So, Jade's got some great tips around coachability for athletes in the ways that they can improve themselves within their team.
Yeah, look, it's a really interesting space. I've got 3 tips that I want to throw out there for players. The first one is, I think when you are in different teams, as you will be as you go along your netball journey, you are going to come across so many different coaches, and they're going to say different things to you or give you different instructions, teach you skills that might seem different to what you've learned from another coach. And that's okay, because every coach is different. So as a player, the best thing for you to do is try and implement what they're asking you to do. And if it does seem really different or confusing, is just seek clarification on that. You definitely won't have a cross against your name if you ask a question of your coach. If anything, I know we love it when players ask questions because sometimes we don't know that a player isn't quite unsure, and we just see them out there trying to do a particular skill. So please ask questions and know that it's okay if you're getting told different things from different coaches. That's actually the beauty of netball, because there's so many different ways to teach things and coaches all have their different flair. The second thing is to be process focused, not results focused. So sometimes when we work with athletes and we're teaching complex or more advanced skills, it can be a little bit overwhelming, or if we're trying to get a great result like an intercept, that becomes the focus for some athletes. And what we want you to go away and think about is, okay, just taking it one step at a time. What was the first part of this skill that I need to try and do, or strategy, and then just slowly progressing through it. Don't be overwhelmed by it. Again, asking a question is fine, but just keep focusing on the moment that you're in rather than, we've got to get this turnover, particularly in a training environment.
And even just on that, even for everybody, I think one of the things that we're really big on is making sure that we follow process or get the process right, because the result will take care of itself. Often we do get caught up, whether it's in netball or at work or in our relationships in general, we get stuck on having to get to the end result too quickly, and therefore we don't perform as well as what we should because we're focusing on the wrong things. In clutch games, we go back to thinking, we're one down, we've got to get the ball from one end to the other really quickly. We just need to follow the process. So I think that's a great tip for athletes to be coachable, is getting the process right from themselves and their perspective, and letting the result take care of itself.
And my last point is knowing your learning style as a player, or just creating some awareness around this. So coaches themselves, and I'm sure Guy will talk about this, have to be aware of learning styles, but you as a player, if you can identify how you best learn, that's going to just give you a step ahead of the rest. So there are lots of different ways you can learn, but if you know, for example, that you learn best by doing something, well then put your hand up to be the demonstrating player. Or if you feel like you need to see it drawn up and the coach does it one training, let them know that that was great and that you felt you were really able to pick up the skill quickly. So just the last thing I want to leave you with is coaches know when you're giving it your best, and that's all we want you to do. We never expect that you will get everything perfect, but we know when you're working hard and you're trying your best to get it right, and even if it takes a little while to get there, we can see that, and that's all that we are wanting from you. We just want you to try hard and really put in and concentrate. So that's probably my number one thing to take away.
Yeah, and you mentioned a word in there that not to say that we don't use, but we tend to steer away from, and that's the word expectations. And often, I think as players, we put those expectations on ourselves because we want to achieve so much, when really, from a coaching point of view, we generally work with standards because it's much easier to work towards a standard than to stick to an expectation. And I think that's important to understand as well, that what Jade's saying is don't think that coaches expect all this from you, is that they just want to see you improve. So really important to take that away. And the other side is coachability, which you're obviously going to chat about in a second, Guy. And it's one thing that we're massive on, is we think that our point of difference is that our coach's ability to engage is one of our key strengths. And I think across the board that shines through in what we do, and also the results we're able to get out of athletes. So you're going to chat about coaches' ability and some of the key points and tips that you can give to coaches for their benefit.
Yeah, and I think it's really important, and I'm sure Jade and Greg feel very similar, that the first thing is to know who you are as a coach and what your coaching style is. We need to know what our athletes' coaching style is, but we also need to know what our coaching style is and how do we best communicate and what's our communication style. What are some of our things that we do really well, so our strengths, and what are some of the things that we need to keep working on, and knowing what those are is really important. And I feel like we've all really evolved throughout our coaching journey as well. I'm a very different coach to when I first began, and that's what it is. It's, you take all these learning opportunities and develop. But I've never changed who I am as a coach in terms of my personality and, my different little quirks and flair, because like Jade said before, all coaches are different. They've all got their little bits and pieces that they throw in that make them who they are. So don't lose that. We don't want robots out there coaching athletes.
Good point.
The second thing is then obviously to know who you're coaching and know the athletes that you're working with, and that can change from junior players to senior players. It can change from one team that you're coaching in 15 versus another team in 15. So really understanding who you're coaching and what their learning styles are. So like Jade mentioned, great that the athletes can get to know what their learning styles are, but knowing what your athletes' learning styles are is really important, and then knowing how to communicate to them within that. And there might be different ways that you might have to do that throughout the session or throughout the season. But then also making sure that you're getting to know them as a person as well. And I think that's the reason why a lot of us get into coaching, is that we like to build those relationships and build those rapport with players. And they almost become a bit of an extension to who you are as a person. So the first thing I always love to do is get to know them as a person, and then get to know them as a player or an athlete. And I think that that's a really helpful tip. And then finally, I think the best thing is to know when to change. As Jade said, the players aren't all perfect, and we don't expect them to be able to perform everything 100% perfectly. As coaches, we're not perfect either. There'll be times where we'll come up with this fantastic drill and we think it's going to be, amazing, but it doesn't quite work out like that. So you've got to be able to think on the fly and change it. And that might be that, rather than just saying the same thing over and over and over again to a player that you just can see in there that it's just not getting through. As a coach, we need to be able to change it and go, okay, is it my way that I'm communicating or explaining it to them? Do I need them to be able to see it? Do I need them to be able to see somebody else performing it really well? Do I need to draw it up on a whiteboard or on a piece of paper for them to see it? Or just change, just one thing maybe, and it might just click. And there's been lots of times where I've kind of seen that happen, and you're using the one bit of terminology over and over and over again, and then you just change one key word and it just flicks a switch for them. So don't be afraid to identify when you need to change as a coach. It's not always about the player or the athletes that need to change. Sometimes as coaches we need to change as well.
Yeah, and I think on that, I love listening to you guys talk about this stuff, because on that, the other important thing for coaches is to review their training sessions, to know when things went wrong during a training session. And if that's an opportunity for you to go, okay, well, that was at the point where it went wrong, who can I speak to maybe change that part of my coaching or my terminology? Like, what can I do to learn more? But the other thing that you provoked a thought, and that was around the communication styles with athletes. And it's so important to know who your athletes are, because you can maybe yell at one athlete and then have to speak really faintly to another athlete. And it provoked a thought. My first year playing under 17s, I think it was 17s or 19s with Victoria, my coach at the time, we had a great relationship, player-coach relationship, and it was my first opportunity to go away to a nationals. And at halftime of one of the games, I was playing terribly. I wasn't playing my role, goal attack, and my defensive pressure wasn't great, which is something the guy reminds me about a lot. And I remember coming off at halftime, and my coach at the time, she screamed the house down at me, and very close, very animated, and it was the one thing that got me going, because I was like, right, I've got to change. You know, that hit the spot for me as an athlete. I loved somebody telling me how it was, but every athlete's different, so it's not necessarily going to be the same for every athlete within your team. So I think they were some great tips.
Just on that, if you don't know, ask them. I've often said to a player, do you like me yelling out to you during a game, or would you prefer me just to chat to you at the break? And sometimes you'll be surprised, and sometimes you'll be like, yep, I thought that would be the case. But don't be afraid to ask that question.
Yeah, I agree. Now, last episode, challenge number 1 was our skipping challenge. There seemed to be some people that played some favouritism within the voting towards Jade. I was really excited to see how many votes came through for me. I got 1, thanks Jason Ince, old school buddy of mine. But yes, you took out challenge number 1, and technically, look, some of the moves that you did were great. You did falter a couple of times. Guy was very clean, but we have to go with the votes, and the most votes came through for you. So well done for challenge number 1.
Yep. Challenge
number 2, I would have thought that it might have suited me being a goaler. We have gone out, we've done a pressure cooker challenge to see who is the best Inspire shooter of the day.
Pressure.
Under pressure, yeah. Not of career-wise, but on the day, who is the best shooter with the conditions that we had. So check it out. Okay, welcome to the Great Inspire Battle, challenge number 2. This time we've come down to the netball courts to see who is the best shooter. So the challenge is a goal shooting pressure cooker test to see who can get the most points in 1 minute. You'll also see cones out on the court. Each colour is worth a different point. So red is worth 1 point, yellow is worth 2 points, green is worth 3 points, and the purple, which I'll probably hit the most of, is worth 4 points. Don't hold me to that either. Bit of strategy will come into play. It's windy down here at Carlisle Park. Jade's complaining that it's cold. So let's see who is the best shooter at Team Inspire. Contestant number 1 is Mr Netball. 60 seconds on the clock. Let's see how he goes. 3, 2, 1, go. Alright, time for contestant number 2, the box. 1 minute on the clock. Time starts now. Alright, the final competitor is the Super Coach. Then she goes back to back. Let's check it out. 1 minute, go. Okay, round 2 sees us take away the red and the yellow cones because a little bit of strategy went into round 1 and the scores I think are a little bit uneven. Let's see who's got a shot from range. Mr Netball, 60 seconds, round 2, off you go.
Round 2, let's take it out. Go.
Okay, score update. We've got Greg on 22, I'm on 23, and Guy's on 27 in front. This is our final round. You can see we've only got the purple cones out, so we're all going to be shooting from range. Who will be the winner? Let's have a look. 3, 2, 1, go.
Alright, final round for the boss. He needs 4 long range shots to get the lead. Let's see how he goes. And go. Alright, here we go. Final round. The pressure is on. The pressure cooker needs 3 to 4 to win. How does Super Coach do it? 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so welcome back to the studio. We hope you enjoyed challenge number 2, which is the pressure cooker goal shooting challenge. The final results, Jade on 27, myself on 30, and Mr Netball on 34. So well done. Conditions were pretty rough out there, so we might revisit that in an indoor controlled environment later on just to see if the results are a little bit different. Just to recap on the really important tips that Jade and Guy went over in regards to coachability versus coach's ability for athletes. Tip number 1 was no 2 coaches will ever be the same, so ask questions. Number 2 was self-awareness, know your own learning style. Number 3 was be process-driven, not results-driven. Okay, really important. And for coaches and their coach's ability, number 1 was know who you are as a coach, your communication style, your strengths and weaknesses, know who you are. Number 2, know who your athletes are. They link in together and what their styles are. And number 3, identify when you need to change. It's really important that we look inward as coaches and not just expect athletes to be doing the changes. So until next episode, have a great week and happy coaching.
Bye.